Hi, my name is Tara Slade. This is an example of a screencast if I wanted to use it to teach my students about the causes that led up to the Revolutionary War. If we first go back to the French and Indian War, this caused Britain to go into a lot of debt in order to defend the American colonies from the Native Americans and their French allies. King George felt that the colonists should have to pay him back for the cost of the war. So this is where we start to see an increase in really silly taxes. The Sugar Act said that the colonists could only buy sugar and molasses from England. They couldn't buy it from any other country or anywhere else. So then they had to have a really heavy tax on that. This is also where we saw the writs of assistance, which allowed the British to search any ships for sugar they might be smuggling from other nations or other colonies. The Stamp Act put a stamp on anything you needed made out of paper. All legal documents, playing cards, newspapers, you had to pay a special tax for these stamps. The colonists began to boycott buying British goods. There was a major increase in making things in America and buying things in America. Not only was there a group called the Sons of Liberty, but there was a group called the Daughters of Liberty. And the Daughters of Liberty were actually at the forefront of this boycott. They were sewing clothes, they were making food, they were making goods. Women were actually the most effective people in this boycott for making goods in America to help stop people from buying things from Britain. Eventually it did work, and the Stamp Act was repealed because the American colonies were hitting Britain where it hurts in their pocketbooks. So the colonists had this small victory, but the motherland was pretty angry with them and sent thousands of soldiers to enforce new taxes. And another new rule was the Quartering Act. These troops in New York and Boston were now allowed to stay in colonists' homes, whether the colonists liked it or not. The Townshend Acts taxed paper, tea, glass, and paint. Basically anything that came from England had a really heavy tax on it, and they weren't allowed to buy from other countries. The colonists did finally decide that Britain didn't have the right to tax them because they were not being represented in the British Parliament, which is where we got the phrase everyone is very familiar with now, that there can be no taxation without representation. Originally, all the colonists wanted was representation in Parliament, but this was not to be. After the events of the Boston Tea Party and the Boston Massacre, the American colonists found themselves on the eve of revolution.